Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In our series of lectures on English linguistics or basic English, today we are going to discuss verb. What is a verb? Verb is a word that describes an action, whether physical or mental. It also describes a state of being, like the verb be, become, or exist. For example, Afridi ran across the field, kicked the ball, and scored a goal. I am the state, as King Louis XIV used to say. Some verbs also act as helping verbs or helper verbs to change the tense of another verb. Likewise, these helper verbs can change a positive statement to a negative one with words like not. For example, she has been jogging for a month and already feels her stamina increasing. Then I don't feel so good. Every sentence needs at least one verb. If there is no verb, it is an incomplete sentence or a sentence fragment. Except for imperative sentences or the commands in which a command is given, a sentence also needs a subject, the thing doing the action. Subject is the thing which does the action. Subjects are important for verb because they change how it is used. Then we have the types of verbs. The first type is dynamic or action verbs. Most verbs describe the physical action or activity or something external that can be heard or seen. These verbs are formally known as dynamic verbs. They can also be called action verbs. Examples of such verbs are the dynamic verbs are walk, laugh, swim, play, eat, drink, sing, dance, talk, say, etc. There are a lot of actions that take place in our minds and feelings which are not external. Verbs that describe mental or internal actions are still dynamic verbs, but they are not always so obvious or so clear. These include process verbs which describe actions of transition. Examples of such verbs are consider, guess, change, grow, live, endeavor, succeed, fail, etc. Stative or state of being verbs. It is the opposite of dynamic verbs, are the verbs of action. Stative verbs describe a subject state or feeling, including things they like and don't like, the things that they don't like. Examples of static verbs are want, need, prefer, love, hate, like, dislike, see, know, believe, involve, realize, etc. One of the most important parts of stative verbs is that they cannot be used in the continuous tenses. Stative verbs stick to the simple tense as they are occasionally used in the perfect tenses. The trouble is that some verbs can be dynamic or stative depending on the specific meaning and how they are used. Verbs that can be dynamic or stative. Several verbs have more than one meaning, so they can be used as dynamic or stative. These include perception words or perception verbs like see, hear, taste, smell, feel, etc. When perception verbs are used as an involuntary action, such as passive or unintentional actions, they are stative. This applies when these verbs are used in the general sense, a state of being that's always happening. For example, I can't see without my glasses. The cake still tastes great even if, or cake still tastes great even if it is not your birthday. When those same verbs are used for voluntary actions, specific, deliberate, and or temporary events, they are dynamic. Among other things, it means they can be used in the continuous tenses. For example, I haven't been seeing well since I lost my glasses. We were tasting cakes for the wedding all the afternoon. Likewise, some perception verbs have alternative meanings, especially if they are part of expressions or phrasal verbs. Often this means they act as dynamic verbs. For example, Romeo and Juliet had been seeing each other for just 5 days when they died. Other verbs like think, have, and above all be follow the same voluntary or involuntary rules as perception verbs. Depending on how they are used, they can be either dynamic or static. For example, I think toads are better than frogs. Here the verb are is static. It expresses an opinion or feeling always there. It is involuntary. All morning I was thinking about how toads are better than frogs. In this sentence, the verb thinking is dynamic. It expresses the temporary action of thinking, and it is voluntary action. I have a 10-year-old dog. This is stative, which expresses permanent ownership, and it is involuntary. I am having a party for my dog's 11th birthday. Here the verb is dynamic. The verb having, it is dynamic. It is used as part of phrase, and it is voluntary. He is nice to everyone. This is stative, expresses an ongoing state of personality trait, and it is involuntary. Then we have auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are helping verbs are used in English to change the tense, the voice, or the mood of another verb. When auxiliary verbs are used, there is always a main verb that represents the main action. However, the auxiliary verb must still be conjugated correctly. Here are a few quick examples of how the auxiliary verbs are used or how they are conjugated. I have eaten mangoes many times before. This shows the tense. That piece of mangoes was eaten by me. Here we see the voice, the passive voice. Did you eat my mangoes? It shows the mood. Then we have modal auxiliary verbs. Some auxiliary verbs are added to other verbs to show necessity, possibility, or capability. Like other auxiliary verbs, modal auxiliary verbs are not the main verbs, but they do change its meaning slightly. Some common examples are can, may, could, should, would, must, ought, and might. For example, I could swim across the river, but should I do it? Then we have phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are phrases that act as individual verbs, often combining two or more and changing their meaning. The verb get, for example, becomes many different phrasal verbs when combined with different prepositions. Here we are having an example. When the bus stops, passengers get out on the sidewalk. After losing his job, he is getting by on saving. Getting up and getting by have different meanings. The important thing to remember about phrasal verb is that they can act as a single verb, so you can still use them with other verbs and prepositions. However, when you conjugate a phrasal verb, you only conjugate the part of the phrase that's actually a verb like it. Then there are categories of verb. Aside from the different types, verbs also come in different categories. We have the first category, which is of dynamic and stative and auxiliary verbs. All make up dynamic, stative, and auxiliary verbs all make up the categories below, and these categories are 3 or 4. The first is transitive, the second is intransitive, and the third is ditransitive. This is the first category. Transitive, intransitive, and ditransitive refer to how a verb acts with direct and indirect objects. A direct object is the person or thing that the action happens to, while an indirect object is the person or thing that receives the direct object. For example, Majid threw the ball to Arshad. In this example, the subject is Majid and the verb is throw. The direct object is the ball, because the ball, that is what was thrown. The indirect object is Arshad because he receives the direct object, that is the ball. Verbs that don't use either a direct or indirect object are called intransitive. These verbs are complete actions by themselves. Verbs that use indirect object but not verbs that use direct object but not an indirect object are called transitive. They don't always need a direct object, but they have the option. Examples are clean, like, love, dislike, hate, want, learn, deserve, say. Verbs that use both direct and indirect object are called ditransitive. They don't always need an indirect object, but they have the option. Examples are throw, make, buy, sell, read, give, lend, bring. Just as a verb can either be dynamic or stative depending on the meaning, a verb can sometimes act transitive while at other times it can act as intransitive. These are known as ambitransitive. Ambitransitive verbs are those which sometimes act as transitive verbs and sometimes act as intransitive verbs. These are known ambitransitive. For example, if you ask someone if they are hungry, they might respond, "No, I already ate." This is intransitive. "No, I already ate a sandwich." This is transitive. Then we have the other category of active versus passive voice. This is the second category. The first was of transitive, intransitive, and ditransitive and ambitransitive. In the second category we are having active versus passive voice, the verbs which are active and the verbs which are passive. In English, the standard format where the subject performs an action is known as the active voice. However, you can make the direct or indirect object the subjects of the sentence known as the passive voice. You can make a verb passive by changing the form of the verb to its past participle or the third form. For example, John threw the ball to Richard. This is active. This is active voice. And threw here is active verb. The ball was thrown to Richard by John. This is passive, and thrown here is passive verb. Richard was thrown the ball by John. Here again it is passive, and the verb thrown is used as passive verb here. Linking or copular verbs. A linking verb is any verb, dynamic or stative, that directly connects or links the subject of the sentence to the words in the sentence. For example, Mano is a cat. Here Mano and a cat are the same thing. So is acts as a linking verb in this example. A linking verb, which is also known as copula or copular verb in formal linguistics, connects the subject not just to other nouns and adjectives, but also to prepositional phrase and other verbs in infinitive form. Although the verb be is the most used linking verb in English, other linking verbs like seem and become are also common. For example, Lara is in the kitchen. Lara became fat by eating rice. Lara seems to hate Sundays. Likewise, perception verbs are often linking verbs as well, but only when they describe what is being perceived. For example, the salty rice also tastes spicy. Dogs look happy when the sun sets. The student felt pride when they used perfect grammar. Then we have regular versus irregular verb. This is another category. Regular verbs and irregular verbs. Verbs have different forms to show different uses, such as an action that happened in the past or an action that happens continuously. Normally, these forms allow the same pattern of conjugation so that you can use the same rules for using all verbs. Verbs that use the normal forms are regular verbs. However, some verbs don't want to play by the rules. They have their own unique forms with no patterns, especially for the simple past tense and past participle forms. These are called irregular verbs, and there are quite a few of them, including the most common verb be. Then the verb forms. Before we explain how to conjugate verbs in English, you need to understand the different forms of verb tense. This helps immeasurably when you conjugate on your own. You just need to use the right form at the right time, keeping in mind that these forms work mostly for regular verbs and irregular verbs. Here we are having a chart of some verbs. We have the root, then the third person, then the simple tense, then the present participle, and then the past participle. For example, we have dance or dance, regular. Dance is the root word or the root verb. Dances is the third person singular form. Danced is the simple past form. Dancing is the present participle form, and danced is the past participle. Similarly, sing, sings, sang, singing, sung. Root. The root form is the basic form of the verb with no changes. For example, go, goes, went, gone. Go is the root form. It has no changes. It is also the simple present tense for everything except the third person singular. Go, the third person singular is goes. Then the third person singular present, used with subject like he, she, the singular they, or the third person singular in the present tense. And we add s or es here. For verbs that end in consonant and y, for example, try, carry, you remove the y and add ies. For example, try, tries, cry, cries, carry, carries, etc. Verbs that end in ch and sh, x or z or s, add es to them. For example, watch, watches, kiss, kisses. In simple past, the past tense shows an action that already happened. In most cases, it is made by adding ed. So here we add ed to the root form. For example, stay, stays, stayed. D or ed. In the present participle, which is used for continuous tenses, we add ing in these cases. In the past participle, in the regular verb, we again add ed. And in the irregular forms, like go, went, gone, they are different. Then infinitives and gerunds. Here first we are having examples. Do you like to swim? Do you enjoy learning? Do you like swimming? If you want to use a verb as a noun, you can turn it into an infinitive or gerund. If you say, do you like to swim? This is an infinitive, to swim. If you say, do you like swimming? This is gerund. So when the verb acts like noun, when the verb acts like subject or object, it is gerund. When to is added to it, it is participle. The noun forms of the verb. An infinitive adds the preposition in front of a verb's root form. Although technically two words, an infinitive acts as a single verb. To swim here acts like a single verb. Usually a noun, but sometimes also an adjective or adverb. To forgive is divine. To forgive, here it acts like noun. Bring a snack to eat if you could get hungry. It is collective, describing snack. Alternatively, you can use the verb into a gerund. You can turn the verb into a gerund by adding ing, identical to the present participle. A gerund is strictly used as a noun, and occasionally you can use them to create gerund phrases which act as a single unit to modify the gerund. For example, smoking is injurious to health. So what's the difference between infinitives and gerunds? Often they are interchangeable. Both infinitive and gerund can act as subjects and direct objects. Examples: living in hostel changes your habit. It is correct. To live in hostel changes your habits. It is also correct. However, only gerunds can be the objects of preposition. When I am not fishing, I am thinking about fishing. Some transitive verbs only use infinitive as direct object. For example, want. I want to go fast. It is correct. I want going fast. I want going fast. It is incorrect. Although there are others, some common verbs use infinitives. They include the following: choose, decide, hope, plan, prepare, promise, wish. In general, use the infinitive for situations that are abstract, unreal, or haven't happened yet. Use gerunds for situations that are specific, real, or have already happened. For example, in the mornings, I really like to exercise. It is abstract and infinitive. This morning, I really liked exercising. It is specific and gerund. Then how to conjugate verbs in English? Using verb isn't as easy as just throwing them in a sentence. They need to represent the tense you want, as well as match the subject-verb agreement. This is called verb conjugation, or changing the verb to fit the sentence. In English, there are 4 main tenses, each divided into 3 time periods, 12 tenses in all. Some other tenses exist, but these are the most common ones. Main tenses are simple, continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous. And main time periods are present, past, and future. Below we explain how to conjugate each of the main tense in the present, past, and future. Keep in mind that irregular verbs may use different forms. Subject-verb agreement. No matter what tense you use, your verb has to match the number of the subject. In other words, singular subjects conjugate verb differently than plural subjects. A lot of the time, you either add s to the end of the verb or you don't. However, more advanced tenses with auxiliary verbs can get tricky. Both be and have are irregular verbs, so you have to pay close attention to it. How to conjugate simple tenses? The simple tenses are the most straightforward. That's what makes them simple. They represent individual one-time actions. How to conjugate the present tense? The simple present tense is used for actions that happen regularly or things that don't change, such as preference or opinions. It is made with the root form unless the subject is third person singular, that is he, she, the singular they and it, in which case you use the third person singular present form. Root or third person singular present. Examples are: Kim feels lousy today. I study every night before bed. How to conjugate the past tense? The simple past tense describes single action that already took place or a habitual action that no longer occurs. It uses the simple past form explained above. Examples: when I was young, I played in the backyard every day. They lost again and no one was surprised. How to conjugate future tense? The simple future tense describes events that have not happened yet and in planning or preparing. It uses the root form but adds the word will in front. Will plus the root. For example, you will study verbs until you understand them. Once again, history will repeat itself. Then how to conjugate continuous tenses? The continuous tense, which is also known as the progressive tense, is used for mostly ongoing events that are temporary. Remember that stative verbs cannot be used in the continuous tenses. Actions about feeling or state of being that happened in the past use the simple past tense. Example: how to conjugate the present continuous tense? The present continuous tense is used often and has many different uses. It is used for events happening right now, ongoing events that are temporary, plans for the near future. It is often confused with the present simple. Situations which might seem like the simple present, such as action happening currently, are actually best represented by the present continuous. From the present continuous by adding the conjugated simple present form of be before the present participle of your main verb, the ing form. Am is are plus present participle. For example, Tony is sleeping at the moment. Later, we are seeing the news only movie. Everyone is talking about it. How to conjugate the past continuous tense? The past continuous tense shows ongoing events that happen in the past, specifically ones that have definitive beginning and end. It can also be used to show a past event that was interrupted by another past event. Note that the past continuous is only used for events that are completed. From the past continuous by adding the conjugated simple past form of be before the present participle. Yes, the present participle. Was, were plus present participle. For example, they were eating dinner when the phone rang. It was raining all day, but we still had fun indoors. How to conjugate the future continuous tense? The future continuous tense describes ongoing events that will happen in the future, specifically if they have a definitive beginning and end. It is found by adding the words will before the present participle. Will be before the present participle. Will be plus present participle. For example, we will be skiing all the Saturday. Then how to conjugate the perfect tense? As one of the most confusing tenses in English, the perfect tense takes some practice. It has very particular usage guidelines, especially the present perfect, and it is closely related to the simple past. How to conjugate the present perfect tense? The present perfect tense is used for a few special circumstances, mostly connected to past events that haven't yet ended. Action started in the past but continuing into the present. Repeated actions in the past without mentioning when past actions for more emphasis or dramatic effect. To form the present perfect tense, add the present conjugation to have before verbs past participle. For example, I have worked here since the beginning. Macbeth has murdered the king. When a sentence has two past events, the past perfect tense, also known as the pluperfect, to show which one happened first. It is typically used in compound complex sentences when with two clauses to show the order in which they happened. For example, I had forgotten about our date until she reminded me. The future perfect tense refers to an unfinished event from a future when it is already completed. Confused? Say you are riding your bike on Saturday. By Sunday you will be finished riding your bike. You can say my bike ride will have finished by Sunday. That's why the future perfect tense is usually used with an expression of time for context. It is found by adding the verb will have before the past participle. You don't need to conjugate have because it's the same no matter what the subject is. Will have plus past participle. By the time I can vote, I will have graduated already. Then how to conjugate the perfect continuous tenses? One of the most complicated tenses in English, the perfect continuous tense, combine the perfect and continuous tenses at the same time. It is largely used with the perfect tense, but with ongoing or continuous actions. How to conjugate the present perfect continuous tense? The present perfect continuous tense describes an ongoing action started in the past that continues to the present. If that sounds familiar, it is because that is one of the situations we use the normal present perfect tense too. So, what's the difference? The present perfect and the present perfect continuous can often be used interchangeably, but the big difference is emphasis. The present perfect continuous emphasizes that the event is ongoing, whereas the present perfect alone emphasizes completion or achievement. To form the present perfect continuous, add the conjugated form of have, the word been, and the present participle. Has or have plus been plus participle. For example, the town has been mining gold since the 1800s. I have been locked in my closet for hours. Like the past perfect continuous tense is used in complex and compound sentences to show which event happened first. While the past perfect tense describes an individual action, the past perfect continuous shows the ongoing action. For example, until the moment our picnic began, the sun had been shining all the day. The future perfect continuous tense functions just like the future perfect tense except with an ongoing action. The major difference is that with the future perfect tense, the event will have ended, but with the future perfect continuous, the event would still be happening by that time in the future. Both, however, are frequently used with expressions of time. The future perfect continuous tense is found by adding the words will have been before the present participle. For example, in a few weeks, she will have been studying English for a whole year. By 6, we will have been stuck in this elevator for 4 hours. And at the end, there are 3 experts' tips on putting verbs into action. How to put the verbs into action? We have 3 expert tips. Tip number 1. Use verbs instead of other words for more powerful writing. Verbs aren't just necessary for grammar, they are also the most helpful words for writing. Whether you are writing a school essay, a work email, or social media post, try to use verbs over nouns or adjectives to provide the details. This may involve rewording some of your sentences, but your changes will improve your writing as a whole. Strong writing uses as few words as possible, so a single verb sounds better than a group of words that say the same thing. For example, he is a proofreader for work. He proofreads for work. In the end, we were successful. In the end, we succeeded. The second tip is use the active voice whenever you can. It is far better to use active voice than the passive voice. Good writing should be an active voice. Although the passive voice is grammatically correct, the active voice is usually preferred. It follows the same principle mentioned above. Fewer words mean stronger writing. The fewer the words, the stronger the writing. Not only does the active voice sound better, but also it is easier for your reader to understand because the subject comes first. Whenever you notice a sentence in the passive voice, see if you can reword it to say the same thing in the active voice. For example, the homecoming game was attended by almost every student. You can change into almost every student attended the homecoming game. It was there that they found the last string. They found the last string there. And then we have tip number 3, which is that we should use specific verbs instead of modifying general verbs. Our last tip again follows the principle that fewer words are better. Instead of modifying or describing your verb to get across your meaning, try using another, more specific verb instead of it. There are thousands of verbs in the English language. Instead of adding words to describe the verb you have, use another more precise verb to take its place. For example, instead of writing run fast, you can say sprint. Talk quietly, you should say whisper. Bump into each other, you should say collide. Of course, knowing the right word in every circumstance is not easy, especially in English, if English isn't your primary language. Don't be afraid to use the Grammarly writing assistant. In addition to catching all spelling and grammar mistakes while you write, Grammarly can also suggest better word choice. Grammarly's writing feedback can recommend better, stronger verbs with the meaning you are looking for. Grammarly, this is a site, as well as suggest alternatives to words you use over and over again. Try it and see how your writing improves. This was an article which was written in 2017. I hope you have got some knowledge about verb, and from now onwards you will be able to discuss verb, its types, how to conjugate it, how to use it, how to place it, where to place it, and what are the types of verbs. And with this we come to the conclusion. Thank you very much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe